Hello, everyone, and welcome to June. We have made it to National Indigenous History Month and Pride. So just to introduce ourselves, my name is Alicia Fisher. I'm the Prevention Education Supervisor with the Kawartha Sexual Assault Center. My pronouns are fluid, and I'm wearing an awesome shirt.
And my name is Lucas Schaefer. I'm the Mending Program Coordinator at the Kawartha Sexual Assault Center. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm wearing a matching shirt.
Amazing. So we also want to respectfully acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Mississauga Anishinaabe. Our care for and healing and what has been taught to us from Indigenous peoples about this land is something that we hold near and dear to our heart. To briefly talk about the intersections of sexual violence with National Indigenous History Month and Pride, we recognize that there is a difference in stats, isn't there, Lucas?
Absolutely. We know from Stats Canada that 1 in 3 women and 1 in 8 men will experience sexual violence in their lifetime. But in order to record the rate at which people from the 2S LGBTQ community experience sexual violence, we have to turn to local specific community resources like Rainbow Youth Ontario that tells us that 1 in 2 trans people will experience sexual violence sometime in their life, which is already painting us a picture of a disproportionate amount of violence being directed towards people in that community.
And those numbers are unfortunately very similar for Indigenous women as well. And I think just recognizing where we are with National Indigenous History Month, this month and the timing of this comes on the heels of us having to face the violent history of residential schools. And I'll use the term history quite loosely because the last residential school was closed around 25 years ago. So this is not a far off history and is really, in fact, a very small tip of the iceberg of harm that was caused by the colonial genocide of Indigenous peoples. So we must continue to talk about these residential schools, the 60 scoop, the Highway of Tears, the inquiry of missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit folks, to keep that passion alive, to keep those memories alive, and to know about the injustices that have been committed against the original people of this land. In talking and telling about these truths, listening to these stories, it highlights stories of resilience, rebellion, as well as hope. And so we must not only learn about this history of colonization, but the history of Indigenous peoples before colonization, the diverse languages, cultures, and traditions of First Nations, Métis, Inuit people, and this must be preserved. Our center is so incredibly grateful for the local groups who continue to do this work and work with Indigenous folks to decolonize the land and preserve the Indigenous culture. So this is a huge shout out to Neech Quinidad, Anishinaabe Quaywalk Service Circle, and the Gojuan Friendship Center, as well as many others. And now we're heading into a kind of ish month with Pride. Yeah, Lucas.
Yeah, no worries, Alicia. So we know that June is also alongside Indigenous History Month, Pride Month, but in Peterborough, it looks a little bit different, right? We celebrate Pride all throughout the year, including June, but we have a lot of our events and our awesome Pride Parade going to be happening in September.
Well, it happens in September. We'll see. Well, I don't know about a parade, but yeah.
We'll have to see. At our center, we are so privileged to be able to say that we support supporters and survivors of all gender identities and are doing this work alongside our amazing local partners like CMHA's Gender Journeys as well as PARN. And to kind of recontextualize Pride and emphasize the amazing parts of it and its origin, I'm going to take it to Alicia.
Yeah. Bottom line, Pride exists because of a Black, bisexual, trans woman who was a sex worker and that threw a brick at a cop and started a riot against the state. So as much as we've done so much work in moving towards equality and equity, there is still a far, long way to go. And we must recognize that Pride was started by a Black, queer, trans woman who was a sex worker. And I think it's really important that we don't lose those roots, especially when we're faced with the oppressions of capitalism and white supremacy and the continuous causes of harm, of sexual violence that is impacting these folks, whether it's from the 2S LGBTQ community or from Indigenous cultures. It's really important that we recognize that this month, and as well as support folks. So whether we're learning about these histories, donating to local community resources, reaching out, showing support, spreading awareness, and advocating for the rights of these folks, especially with what we're seeing down in the United States in America with the banning of trans athletes being able to play sports. It's quite horrendous. So, this work, as much as we like to think that, we've come so far in certain areas, we certainly have. It's really important to understand that we are not there yet. So as much as we want to celebrate, we still have to advocate.
Thank you so much, Alicia. Just like emphasizing that both these months alongside each other are very reflective. We can look back on things that have happened, but with that reflection, it needs to come with the understanding that things are to be done right now. The influence of colonial violence against Indigenous peoples and nations of like many nations is still happening, and happening in different forms. And a lot of those forms are still perpetuated by the Canadian state. Yeah.
So thank you everyone so much for joining us today. It's a dark time, it's a difficult time, but we are here with our 3 lines of 24/7 crisis support, all of which can be accessed through our website, kawarthasexualassaultcenter.com. So thank you everyone so much for joining us today throughout the month of June, and we will definitely see you at future events marching alongside all of you. So thank you all so much.
Take care.